Today I want to talk about Superman Legacy. Disclaimer, I'm very well aware that I have said that James Gunn is a bad CEO. I stand by that statement. I have also said that James Gunn wouldn't have voluntarily picked to write and direct the Superman film, and I don't believe he's a huge Superman fan either. I stand by that statement. I've also said a copy and paste of Superman 78 isn't the right thing to do. But despite making all of these statements, we're going to talk about James Gunn's plans for Superman Legacy and what type of film it's going to be. Now, in terms of Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, if you haven't seen her do anything before, you should see her in the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I think it's called, and you should see David Corenswet in lots of different things. You can check him out on YouTube as well to see the different acting things that he's done. What's interesting about David and Rachel, they're not necessarily physical specimens, they're more actors. They're proper artistes, they're proper actors. If you look at David's body of work, if you look at Rachel's body of work, they're very performance focused. They're very dialogue focused, and they're very, very good at doing it. You know, their body shape, the way they speak, they've done long monologues in their time, long two-way conversations. They're proper actors. So Amy Adams is also a proper actor. So you could say that about, we had an actress in Lois Lane, in an actress playing Lois Lane, in Amy Adams, that was also very, very, very talented. There's no question about that. But Rachel Brosnahan is very different to Amy. Amy was an interesting Lois, really. I mean, they went at her in a certain way in Man of Steel, and it was in a way to make sure that she knew Clark was Superman from day one. Now, this really, really worked for me and many people, because some people say Lois Lane not knowing Clark is Superman makes her look dumb. In a way, it does. But sometimes in life, you do have to suspend disbelief. Now, if you compare David Corenswet with Henry Cavill, they both look alike. But that's when the identical facets end. Henry Cavill is a physical specimen. He's a physical Superman. He don't do monologues as Superman. He never did. It's about what he looks like. And he looks like a great Superman. He was photographed by Zach beautifully. Because Zach's all about, the kind of image of something. He comes from photography. He studied art in London. So Zack Snyder's a very different type of director. So to no surprise to anyone, he wanted Superman to look a certain way. So it's very interesting. David Corenswet and Henry Cavill are two very, very different actors. And that's okay. But what I would say about David is he's an actor's actor. He acts. He performs dialogue. And he can do miles and miles of dialogue. And he's very convincing, as can Rachel Brosnahan. So I think that's the first facet we have to look at here. It's not something that's a hot take. This is not a video where I start, giving you truth bombs and getting angry like I have the past few days. This is about me delving into a movie and having a look at it and analysing what it could be. So number one thing you should expect in terms of the Daily Planet, it will be very different to the Snyderverse. In the Snyderverse, we didn't spend a lot of time in the Daily Planet. Of course, we had Perry, and we had Lois, and we had Clark in Man of Steel. We had Perry and Lois in the Daily Planet in Man of Steel. And there were conversations, and I loved the dynamic between them. It was very Lois and Perry in Man of Steel. We never really got that again in the Snyderverse. But I think the difference was to Man of Steel, at the very least, David Goyer did write Man of Steel, which made it different. At least he focused on the relationship between Perry and Lois at the Daily Planet. We didn't really get that in BVS. It went in a different direction. Yeah, We had Clark there, we had Lois there, and we had Perry there. But it was very, very different. And actually very traditional Lois, Clark and Perry. But it was interesting. So what you can expect from the Daily Planet dynamic from James Gunn, David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan is a lot of banter, a lot of long conversations. When you see them in there, there'll be long conversations. As I say, there'll be banter, there'll be arguing who should get credit for a story. If you want to compare it to anything, compare it to the Dean Cain, Terry Hatcher dynamic that they did have in the Daily Planet. You can also compare it to, Superman the movie and Superman 2 with Lois, Clark, Perry and Jimmy. Because there will be a Jimmy Olsen in Superman Legacy, and I want there to be a Jimmy Olsen. Snyder fans will tell you that Jimmy Olsen isn't an important character, but I tell you he is, damn it, and I'll tell you why. And I've told you this before. He's pretty much like the companion in Doctor Who. Jimmy, when you look at the comics, is your way into the story. He's a 16, 17-year-old boy coming out of school. His first job is being a runner at the Daily Planet. He's a wannabe photographer, but his itch is he can never get that perfect picture of Superman. He befriends Clark and he becomes Superman's best pal, even getting a special watch from Superman. So it's a very, very special relationship. And done properly, that can be very relatable to a young audience. Because, as I've said about Man of Steel before, it's a very modern day, it's a contemporary take at Superman. But it is made by a Batman fan. I'm not saying that Zack Snyder doesn't like Superman or hates Superman, but I wouldn't say he's a big Superman fan. He admitted himself he's a Batman man and the comics that he likes from DC. So when you look at Superman in Man of Steel, he smiles, yeah. He's a pure, kind character, as he's always been, but he's also a bit of a blunt object, especially when he's fighting Zod and they crash into the petrol station. And one of the criticisms of the film is that he didn't seem that bothered that that petrol station was blowing up all over the place. People died. Now, here's the problem. Zack Snyder and David Goyer will tell you, well, that's what would have happened in the real world. So it's a real world kind of Superman. It's kind of saying to you, this is what would happen. What would happen? It's asking the question, what would happen if Superman was in the real world? Some people, most people I think, didn't want that question asking. And I think that's why Man of Steel and BVS and the Snyderverse in general is a polarizing franchise, and it created a few problems for Warner Brothers, and in the end it didn't have the rewatchability in cinemas it needed. And some people were very, very offended by the Snyderverse. I enjoyed the Snyderverse. I don't have an issue with the Snyderverse. We're just talking about maybe why it wasn't as successful as it could have been, because Zack's movies are expensive and they did need to make more money. $650 is the global box office for Man of Steel, which is not enough because Zack Snyder movies are expensive, and I think that's the point. But I love Man of Steel, I love BVS, and I love the Snyder Cut, and I stand by that. But James Gunn's movie will be very, very different. As I say, the Daily Planet will have banter, long conversations, and it will be funny. It will be a little bit like, and some people won't like hearing this, a little bit like a situation comedy in there as well. But what you're going to see is kind of like when you go to work, you have banter, you like some people, you don't like others. So there's going to be arguments, there's going to be a relationship. The Daily Planet has always been Clark's second family, Perry, Jimmy, Lois, and Gunn will set that up. So that's that element of Superman Legacy, and it'd be interesting how audiences react to that, if they want to see that. That will slow the pace of the film down, and is it something that modern day audiences will accept? Because modern day audiences don't have a high concentration threshold. This is when there's dialogue in a movie, we hear the pacing, there was problems with the pacing. It's not a problem with the pacing just because people are talking, but modern day audiences don't like talky movies. That's the problem. Some do, but I mean, they don't make as much money. The movies that make more money are the movies with lots of action and a fast pace. Look at Bay's first Transformers. People loved it. It made record-breaking money. Interestingly, Man of Steel is a bit like a Michael Bay movie in a lot of ways in terms of the action. And Michael Bay does great action, so does Zack Snyder. But Man of Steel does have a lot of talky moments, and it also has a lot of emotion in it. And we mustn't say it hasn't, but it's not a traditional Superman movie. And Superman Legacy will definitely do that. So it will basically, everything from the Superman comics, it will set those traditional things up. Something we were told when Superman Legacy was announced, along with the rest of Gods and Monsters Phase 1, you know, James Gunn spoke about the character and did mention truth, justice, and the American way. Now that's interesting, because woke Hollywood and woke modern day DC Comics don't like truth, justice, and the American way. So as I say, this is stuff probably coming from David Zaslav. He doesn't want to rock the boat. Zaslav believes in Superman, believes that Superman should be the first movie in a brand new universe. So, you know, they're going to go in a very traditional way, as I say. Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, Perry White, all of that. But what kind of Superman? We discussed what kind of dynamic in the Daily Planet we're going to get. But what kind of Superman are we going to get from David Corenswet? Well, it's going to be absolutely the stark contrast of Henry Cavill's Superman. And what kind of Superman that will be, you just have to look at David's personality. I've seen him in interviews, I've seen different performances, and he's a very different guy, and he's going to give you a very different version of Superman. Definitely a more traditional version of Superman, a more talky version of Superman. As I say, Henry Cavill didn't really speak much as Superman or Clark Kent. It was really all about Henry's physicality, because Henry has never been a talky actor. Henry gets work because of his physicality, because of his chin, because of his looks. He is a good actor. Don't misunderstand me. He's a great Superman, but he's a physical actor, and there's no question. David Corenswet is going to bulk up. I don't think they'll bulk him up as much as Henry was bulked. I mean, Henry was bulked up a lot in Man of Steel. I'm not sure if Henry was bulked up too much. When he hasn't got his top on and he steals the clothes from the washing line, I thought, fuck me. They really did build him up. And when you see the BTS of Man of Steel, and you see, and they speak to the physical trainer, and you think, bloody hell, this guy may have gone a little bit over the top, but Henry does look fucking amazing in Man of Steel, BVS, and the Snyder Cut. A physical specimen. And I suppose some people will say Superman should look like a physical specimen. So I don't believe that Corenswet will be the physical specimen of Henry Cavill, but there'll be a lot more, let's say, it will be more character, pushed. It will be more about the character and the personality of Superman, something that Christopher Reeve gave us. Now, this isn't a criticism of Henry Cavill, but I don't think there was enough personality in there. It was more about the physicality and how Superman looked like when he was exposing his powers and fighting, and that's great. And Snyder fans love that element of Zack Snyder. It's about how something looks. It's how it's photographed, and that's great. But James Gunn isn't one of those directors, so I wouldn't expect you to see the same thing. But there will be a lot more personality in this Superman. Yes, this Superman probably will have a few more quips. Now, I've always said, how do you make Superman relatable in a contemporary world? And I think you do have to look at his personality. One of the things people loved about Reeves' Superman is that he had bags of personality as Clark Kent, but as Superman as well, whether it was a wink or a smile or, thank you ma'am, or whatever it was, right? Reeve exuded great personality. Reeve had a lot of likability. Now, when I saw Man of Steel, I saw a very, very different movie and a very, very different Superman. And as I say, it was about the physicality, how awesome Superman looks on screen. But there's good storytelling in Man of Steel, and I enjoy Man of Steel. What I'm saying to you is this film is going to be no Man of Steel. And the problem is, when we hear from fans these days, it's the loudest fans. It's the loudest Superman fans. It's the loudest Snyder fans. And the quiet, maybe better people, we don't hear their voices. I want this channel to be for all voices. I want other people who lack the confidence to speak to come to my channel. Maybe you're a bit too scared to talk about what you want from Superman. Because every day I do a video, I hear from the same voices. That's great. I love you guys. Keep telling me what you think. But I want to also hear from the other voices. What do you think about Superman Legacy? Are you upset Henry Cavill was replaced by David Corenswet? Are you upset that, Rachel Brosnahan has replaced Amy Adams? What do you think? Are you excited? By the way, the fabulous Mrs. Maisel fans. Rachel was brilliant in that show. What do you think of her being cast as Lois Lane? Maybe you can give us a perspective of what kind of Lois Lane we're going to get. I would absolutely love to get your feedback. So if you're watching this and you know any fabulous Mrs. Maisel fans out there, maybe you can get them to come on my channel. Maybe we'll do a live. Maybe we'll do a Superman Legacy live. Maybe that can be done in the next few days as well. I'd love to talk more about Superman Legacy because I don't want this to be an echo chamber. This is not about being a Snyder channel, a DCEU channel, a pro-Snyder channel and an anti-James Gunn channel. That's not what I am. What I do, I take a situation and I break it in two and I tell you what I think of it. So I believe James Gunn's a really good writer-director. As I've repeatedly said, there is no hate from me. I am not angry with James Gunn in the slightest. I believe as CEO, co-CEO of DC Studios, he hasn't conducted himself in the right way and he's been a PR disaster. That's my opinion there. And I've said that. I said that he never wanted to write and direct a Superman movie. But he's been given the job and he's going to do it. I'm not saying he hates Superman. Wouldn't it be nice to actually have a proper Superman fan? Someone who actually appreciates Superman writing and directing a movie. Because that hasn't happened since Dick Donner and Superman the movie. That's the reason that film works even today. Because he believed in the myth. He wanted to keep Superman clean. He wanted to give the audience the traditional Superman. And this is where let me try and say the word. Dick had a word called verisimilitude or something like that. Anyway, I can't even say it properly. It means keeping to the core of the project, keeping to the heart of the project. So it feels like things are actually happening. When you're watching it, it feels like you're watching a real Superman. No, it's different to what Zack and Nolan and Terrio and Goyer were doing. They were saying to you, what if Superman was in the real world? What Dick Donner and Tom Mankiewicz were saying to you was, right, when you're watching it, this isn't a fantasy. This, you're watching something that's actually happening. That's the difference. And as a kid, that's how I felt about it as well. Dick Donner loved Superman. And he understood that Superman was America's mythology. And he wanted to keep it that way. And I do believe that James Gunn is going to go at this the same way. Now, I don't believe this will be a copy and paste of Superman the movie, but what they will do, it will be very, very traditional. Yes, I expect the red pants to come back. I expect there to be a big S shield. And the long cape, probably not as long as Henry Cavill's, if I noticed, it used to drag along the floor a little bit. If you notice in Man of Steel, when they're in the desert, you can see a bit of sand at the bottom of the cape. So maybe a bit shorter there. That's the kind of costume. I expect the spit curl to come back. So the kind of Superman you're going to get from David Corenswet will have bags, more personality, more talking. And yes, he'll be funny at times. We've become this kind of culture now where If we get gags in a CBM, we get offended. I don't personally. If the gags are good and they're well-intentioned, I don't mind. I said this yesterday, just because Zack Snyder makes darker movies and doesn't have many gags in his films, it doesn't mean, everyone else should do the same thing. I saw a Snyder fan on Twitter yesterday say, I miss superhero movies that take themselves seriously. How about this? How about if we get some CBMs that take themselves seriously, and maybe some CBMs that take themselves a little less seriously? Let me be absolutely clear with you. The first Iron Man didn't take itself any less seriously than Man of Steel did. Yeah, you got Robert Downey Jr. cracking jokes, but it's also a very serious movie. It's an anti-war movie. It's an anti-weapons movie. And basically, a bit like, Man of Steel having climate change commentary in it. No difference. So a lot of Marvel isn't the jokey crap that some people say it is. But it did have lighter colour palettes, and it was different. And it attracted the adults and the children, and different demographics. That's why the Marvel Cinematic Universe for 3 phases made so much money until they went fucking insane. Until the entertainment industry went fucking insane. Now, what kind of Clark Kent will David Corenswet give us? Now, this is going to be a very, very interesting Clark Kent, I think. Again, very, very talky. Lots of fast dialogue. Like we saw in the Reeves and Kidder, Lois and Clark in Superman the movie, Superman 2. Superman 4, it was a bit different. The dialogue wasn't great in there, was it? But Superman 4 wasn't a great movie. I still enjoy it. It's okay to enjoy bad movies, by the way. But, yeah, so you're going to have a bit more of a stuttery Clark Kent, more of a talky Clark Kent. It will be interesting. I'm not convinced he will be tripping over and clumsy. But I think what Christopher Reeve came up with in his version of Clark Kent made sense. It was part of the disguise. If you have an overconfident Clark Kent, it isn't going to be that difficult to work out he's bloody Superman. And this is why Chris came up with it. Now, in years after that, he said he was fed up of Clark tripping over things. And Snyderverse fans have tried to use that against the original version of Clark Kent. But it was Chris who came up with that idea. Just so, the people that Clark interacts with don't realise who he is, and it was a very, very good idea. The problem is, once you start him off as clumsy, he has to keep on being clumsy. You can't change your mind in the 5th or 6th movie that he ain't clumsy anymore, because people can say, well, why aren't you clumsy anymore? I suppose you can stop being clumsy, you can evolve as a person, I suppose, but anyway. Yeah, I don't expect him to be overly clumsy, but I do expect him to be very likeable. As I say, you're going to be spending a lot of time with Clark, Lois, Perry, and Jimmy. It's going to be very traditional to the comics. Now, I think that's a good thing. Because here's the thing. We got Man of Steel, a film I adore and I love. We got that version. We shouldn't expect another creative to do the same thing as Zack Snyder. In other words, we shouldn't be Adolf Hitlers about our entertainment. Why am I bringing Adolf into this? Adolf Hitler wanted a world of blonde hair, blue-eyed, white people. And it seems you're either on this side if you're a comic book movie fan or that side. It's either the dark, serious colour palette or it's either the jokey, bright movies. We just want to see good movies. We want these iconic DC and Marvel characters and Star Wars characters and whatever else to be adapted in a great way. They don't always have to adhere to canon, but they have to be relatable. We have to like them. One thing I'll tell you about David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan, I nearly said Rachel Zegler, got her on the mind for some reason because everyone keeps on talking about her. But one thing I will say about David and Rachel is that they're very likeable. It's one thing James Gunn said, that they're very good people, and he's absolutely right. You're going to love them. You're going to fall in love with them. There's a lot of politics in DC fandom right now. The Snyderverse, Cavill, this, that, the other. It's very messy. But there has to come a time where we are able to talk about Superman Legacy, because it is happening right now. I understand Hollywood is in a very fragile position, and anything can change at any time. And there's people who, before they go to bed at night, pray for Superman Legacy not to happen. I don't. I don't pray for Superman Legacy not to happen. At this moment in time, it's happening. Now, who knows what happens going forward? Who knows, by some miracle, if Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom succeeds? You know, a crazy situation of James Wan directing James Gunn's movie. Who knows? Because James didn't want to take up 2 years of his life. He said it himself, directing a character he's not really into. He pretty much said it. Not exactly, but I'm paraphrasing. That's what he meant, right? We'll see. At this moment in time, Superman Legacy is the vision of James Gunn. And the question you're asking, and I'm asking every day on these videos, is James Gunn capable of making a great Superman movie? I'm not going to tell you wholeheartedly I believe in James Gunn in terms of his abilities as a writer-director to deliver a great Superman movie. But that doesn't mean he won't. There is a 10% of me that sometimes imagines James making a great Superman movie. I'm not going to lie to you, but I have my doubts, and I think it's okay to have my doubts. I think James would be all right with me having my doubts. But I'm not one of these fans who's, going to give you a one kind of direction opinion. Yes, James Gunn was brought in by Emmerich and Hamada and all the people who have done all the bad things for many years for DC and have made DC a bad joke. They're the people. And some of those people are still there, and it's a problem. They recycled the Snyder's Justice League and gave us the awful Justice League, again with the awful Flash, exactly the same thing. Now I'm hoping that James Gunn gives us a total reboot, like I'm hearing he is. Now, he came out and said he's going to keep the stuff that worked and not keep the stuff that didn't work. I just hope he starts, ultimately he was just saying that, I'm hoping, because he wanted people to go and watch these remaining DCEU movies. I hope beyond hope. I don't know. I want James Gunn to make a great Superman movie because Superman's my guy. It's my favourite character in fiction. I'm 51 years old on October the 26th. So I don't think there's going to be many more Superman movies for me. Bloody hell. Will I ever get to see an active entertainment industry that's not on industrial action for the rest of my life? Of course I will. But, I want Superman to work. I don't have my eggs in the Snyder basket. I don't have my eggs in the Gunn basket. I appreciate directors. I appreciate writers. I appreciate actors. But I'm not a fanboy. I'm a fanboy in terms of DC. In terms of Superman. That's where my fanboy comes from. I'm not going to fanboy actors and directors and writers. Yeah, I admire you all. And I love you because I love entertainment. I love make-believe. It means a lot to me. A hell of a lot to me. So, I want it to be good. I want Superman Legacy to be good. And I hope that it is, because we're in an era of entertainment right now where we're constantly let down and nostalgia is used as a distraction. And I don't want that. I want a great Superman movie. But I don't necessarily need another Man of Steel or another Superman the movie. And I don't think Superman Legacy will be that. I think Superman Legacy will give us a more traditional Superman, a more traditional Lois, a more traditional Daily Planet setup. He still hasn't cast Perry White. He still hasn't cast Jimmy Olsen, but there have been different actors rumoured to be playing those roles. It's going to be very interesting who fills out those roles, because then we've got Lex Luthor. Who's going to play Lex Luthor? There's been rumours of a black actor as well, which is very, very interesting. Would you like Denzel Washington as an older Lex Luthor? Because he is a lot older than Superman in the comics. I mean, how old is Denzel now? 65? I mean, he's no spring chicken, but, you shave that guy's head off and get him to act. I mean, Denzel as Lex Luthor would be the most powerful thing, and I don't care. I don't like cultural swaps, but that cultural swap, I would absolutely accept, and just like I accepted the casting of Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White, because it's Larry Fishburne. Come on. It's not like they took a random guy and cast him as Perry. I don't know why people were upset about it. So, whether or not we ever get Superman Legacy, whether it's a good film or a bad film, we're going to have to wait and see. But what I've done today is just try and explain to you what type of film we're going to get. But I haven't even gone, into the centre of the movie. Because we know he's going to introduce versions of these DC characters that will populate his DC universe. We've already heard about a version of Green Lantern, but we spoke about, Jason Momoa and Lobo. Is that still a thing? I think Lobo will definitely be involved in Gunn's DC universe, which is exciting because he's a great character and everybody loves him. I don't know if Momoa's still playing him. It'll be interesting. It's certainly something I believe that was used as a kind of, I suppose, to soften the blow of him not playing Aquaman anymore. And as we know, it's an uphill struggle for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom to make money. I think it's worth your time going to see the movie, but I think it's difficult for that movie to succeed. But yeah, you're going to see different DC characters populate this movie as well. And I think a lot of fans will be excited about that. I'll be excited about that, but there is this risk of it diverting from being a Superman movie. Now, James Gunn says that's not the case. Whatever this film is, once these damn strikes are over, we're going to find out a lot more about it. And I'll be excited to talk about Superman Legacy even more.